Vital MT Beers, it's not new bike day, it's new 3 bikes day. 10 Cycles has launched their brand new 2020 primer. And what's unique about this model is that it comes in 3 different wheel sizes. Primer 29 front and rear, Primer 27.5 front and rear, and Primer S, which uses a 29-inch front wheel and a 27.5 plus out back. Intense is also bucking the trend of super long reach measurements with the new primer. The bikes all have similarities, but they're all unique too. So let's dive into these new trail bikes to see what makes them tick, to see who they're for, and to see where they shine. Intense has made an effort to clean up their line. Instead of 5 trail bikes, only the primer exists now with these 3 models. In the trail segment of Intense, the Recluse, the ACV, the Spider, they are no more. There's only 1 carbon layup option now instead of 2, and the number of color choices has been reduced. Additionally, pricing and component selection within the build kits has been simplified. Each primer has 150 mils of travel up front and 140 out back with the JS Trail link. A supple, trail-hugging leverage curve starts the stroke with a ramp toward the middle, helping pedaling without the need for in-shock lockout. There's a flip chip for low or lower geometry, and both choices impact suspension characteristics. Despite the 3 models, there are only 2 new frames, both designed from the ground up. The 27.5 is on its own, while the 29 and the S use the same frame, just with different paint. All the frames use Thai hardware. The color options continue to reflect Intense's race heritage, and there are a few different ways to get on the primer. Across the board, the factory frame only kits are offered at $29.99, Pro builds at $56.99, and Expert builds at $37.99. The Primer 29 and the 275 are offered in high-level Elite builds for $69.99. Primer S not offered in that. Each frame comes in small, medium, large, or extra large, and generally speaking, the sizing is on the conservative side these days. Here's some quick and dirty reach measurements for the new primer. 27.5 reach size medium is 435 millimeters low and 430 lower, 461 and 455 for size large. In the 29 reach size medium, it's 443 in the low and 437 in the lower. It's 468 and 462 for the size large 29. Finally, the Primer S reach, the mixed wheel size, is 435 and 429 mils for the medium, 460 and 454 for the large. Head angles are pretty slack at about 65 or 64.5 degrees depending on the setting for the Primer S and the 27.5. While the full 29 is slightly steeper at 65.9 and 65.3. Bottom bracket heights are pretty darn low in the lower setting. The Primer 27.5 uses a 337.6 mils, the 29er is 337, and the Primer S is a scrapey 326.8 millimeters in the lower setting. Going to the low setting, which is actually higher, bumps the BB up about 7.5 millimeters across the board. Component-wise, the bikes share parts, but subtleties are tweaked based on wheel size and intended use. Dropper post length is size specific. Fox suspension is the only option with DPX2 shocks across the board. The Primer 27.5 uses a 44mm offset Fox Float 34. The 29 and the S use 51mm offsets, but the 29 has a Float 34. The Primer S, the mixed wheel size, has a Fox Float 36 up front. Similarly, the 27.5 and the 29 run a Maxxis 2.5 High Roller 2 up front, while the Primer S, the mixed wheel size, runs a 2.6 Minion DHR 2 up front. 2.3 Maxxis aggressors are found on the rears of the 27.5 and 29, while the Primer S gets a 27.5 by 2.8 Maxxis Recon out back plus tire. One of the interesting notes is that all the bikes run 170mm cranks. 4-piston Shimano brakes stop the front, while 2-piston Shimano brakes stop out back. It's a smart way to get power where you need it without overly bulking up the bike. All bikes feature Intense bars and 45 or 50mm stems depending on the wheel size model, and the Intense house brand grips are surprisingly comfortable and grippy. SRAM Eagle drivetrains complete the builds depending on the kit chosen, anywhere from NX to X01. We haven't been on these bikes for very long, but we did get some test laps at our track near home and even managed a 19-mile shuttle from the top of Bogus Basin down to Boise, Idaho where we're at, which is pretty fun. All of the bikes ridden were mediums, and given their conservative reach, they did feel a bit on the short side. Having ridden the bikes, on the 29er we would size up to a large, on the 27.5 we'd stay right at home on the medium. We think it's a fun smaller bike. On the Primer S, the mixed wheel size, we'd probably like to try a large there too. With that, we adapted, and having the shorter reach did help us keep the weight on the front wheel, which is good with the aggressive head angle. It's easy to get too far back and wash that front wheel out. Shorter reach kind of helped in that department. All of the bikes are really fun. The suspension platform is solid, it does its job nicely, but they all have intricacies that should be considered based on what type of terrain you want to ride. Having never ridden a mixed wheel size until this test, the Primer S was a good introduction. The 27.5 Plus wheel out back keeps the diameter close enough to a 29-inch wheel, but keeps some of the rotational heft of the rim and the spokes a bit tighter. Sitting on the Primer S, we felt a bit reclined while climbing compared to the 29. That's because the seat angle is almost a degree slacker. The 27.5 Plus Recon tire didn't have gratuitously low pressure when we rode it. The beta given to us by Intense was to run the Recon a little bit firmer, and we ran it at 22 PSI. At that pressure, there was some compliance, but it wasn't a wallowy, squirmy balloon. Traction was uncanny with such a big footprint, and in the lower setting, the Primer S is a hoot in the corners and through fast, rough sections. Visually, you have that kind of look of a 29er up front, but out back the bike feels more fleet of foot than a regular 29er. The short reach meant having to make things even shorter by sliding up the saddle to keep the front wheel on the ground. Around tight uphill corners, the slack head angle encouraged the wheel to kind of flop around a bit, which made things a little bit tricky. Despite the climbing challenges, it was a fun first-time experience on a mixed wheel size bike that made us want to try it with a regular 27.5 wheel out back. We haven't done that, but we really want to. Get a little bit low on the Primer S, but I don't know, maybe in the low setting, not the lower, it could work out. If we consistently rode rougher bike parks or more gravity-fed enduro trails, the Primer S would be our go-to bike out of the three Primer models. The Fox 36 fork up front and the Minion DHR2 front tire, combined with the agility of the setup, it's pretty diverse for aggressive riding. While having 27.5 Plus out back made us feel kind of kooky. With a little fine tuning in the pressure department, the Recon is not going to break traction and is good for those who want a consistent, traction-filled experience. The Primer 2.9, while smaller than what we'd hoped for, was a beauty. The modern slacker head angle combined with the suspension properties looked like it'd be the perfect fit for the fast flowing single track here in the Boise area. And it was. There's no comparison to 29-inch wheels front and rear for carrying momentum, providing traction, and smoothing out the trail. Our first lap, however, kind of had us wondering if the front end of the bike was tight. Something just felt loose. And we stopped, and there wasn't anything loose. We figured out that the feeling was coming from the Maxxis High Roller 2 front tire. It's a less than ideal choice for the generally hard-packed trails in our area, which is surprising because the trail conditions here in Idaho are similar to those in Southern California where Intense developed the bike. While fast rolling, the side knobs of the High Roller 2 just don't have much support. There's a squirminess about them, and it takes some getting used to when that tire's used up front. The front felt like it would wander indecisively in cupped out sections of trail. In corners, traction never felt secure. Out back, the High Roller 2 can be a great tire for getting loose, having fun, but up front, unless we're in softer, loamier conditions, we weren't very satisfied with the HR2 up front. What we did, we took the front wheel and front tire off the Primer S, which is a Minion DHR2, and we threw it here on the Primer 2.9. Now, we're happy. The bike shredded, we loved it. And with the Aggressor out back, working nicely for the conditions here in Idaho. The support of the DHR2 side knobs never left us wondering if it was going to hold. The Primer 2.9 was fast, it was efficient, and it would be our pick for anyone who lives in conditions like we have here. Fast rolling single track, open, buff, not a ton of rocks, but some. It's a great bike. It's a do-it-all 29er made for the trail. Climbing was more predictable and stable aboard the 2.9 compared to the S, due to the slightly steeper head angle and seat-tube angle. Sizing up to a large, Primer 2.9 would be the perfect bike for the Boise area. We experienced the same squirmy, uncomfortable High Roller 2 issue on the Primer 27.5 up front, but now we're aware of the situation. Thankfully, we had a 27.5 Minion DHR2 in the same size, and we put that on the 27.5 Primer. After riding the 29, the 27.5 felt slow, but it was nimble. On the bermy, jumpy flow trails at our local zone, the 2.75 is a bunch of fun. In the lower setting, it's really a modern day slalom bike. A nimble bike for moving around and leaning over just feels more fun when it's a manageable size. So the shorter reach with the slacker head angle, that worked for us when we had the smaller wheels of the 27.5. The Primer 27.5 was fast in the tight spaces and should be considered for the smaller rider or the die-hard 27.5 fan. So what do we think could be improved with the new intense primers? If we were to buy either the 29 or the 27.5, immediately we'd take the High Roller 2 off, put on a Minion DHR 2 or something that we like up front. We'd save that High Roller 2 as a back tire. No questions asked. Also, the rear axle, if you're new to intense, it's kind of counterintuitive. You have to loosen a bolt on the non-drive side, and then you have to go to the drive side to get the axle started. But you have to turn it the opposite way, so it's not lefty-loosey, it's lefty-tighty. We thought we knew everything about bikes, started trying to take it apart. Eventually we had to look up how to do it on the Intense website. Now that we know how to do it, it's not a big issue. But trail side, it would be a little less than fun, and there are definitely simpler, easier options out there. Considering the options Intense has with their 3 primer models, the best suggestion we have is try to get on a demo, either through a local shop, through their demo tour. Do what you can to get on these bikes. There are a lot of choices. If you've never ridden a mixed wheel size, maybe that's going to be your jam. And with the reach that they have set up and their geometry, you may want to go up a size compared to what you're used to riding. What do you think? Is the reach too short? If you're a tall rider, are you totally going to be hosed even if you use an XL? Would you try the mixed wheel size, what they're calling 27.9, the Prime S? Let us know in the comments. Be stoked to see what you have to say. Hit up intensecycles.com for more info. You can even purchase them direct off the website.